Well, good morning, everybody. Today is February 9th, 2023, and today we're here back for another wonderful program of the New Possibilities Hour with Will Work for Food. Founded in the spring of 2020 in response to the pandemic, founded by Natalie Armstrong-Motin. The program has just taken off, and now we're coming up on, well, almost 3 years, hard to believe. And all that is asked of people here for these fabulous programs is that you donate to a food bank of your choice or of the choice of the particular speaker, or any food bank around the world. And what is so amazing about Will Work for Food is how it's grown so much, and how we have people from all over the world, and people in person, people watching the videos. So with that said, Jeff's favorite part of the morning is hearing the amount of money of donations to food banks, of which we've been told, and that's a big asterisk. So Jeff, what's the number this morning? How much? What's total?
Thank you, Jean. Indeed, it is always a highlight to acknowledge just how generous our audiences have been in donating in honor of our great speakers. This week, the running total is an astonishing $361,246.90. Thank you all so much. Jean, back to you.
Oh, wow, is all I can say to that. And I do want to acknowledge Jeff as Jeff and I's co-moderators, and Sari Mary, who's here, who is tied in with our special speakers today and on a personal level, and for all the work that they do as well. So let's get to it. Today's program is an interesting one, as are they all, but different one. This one is titled Seeing and Hearing with New Eyes and Ears, How to Transform Your Conflict Resolution Work Through Arts-Based Teaching Methods. And we have as our special guest, Dr. Linda Ippolito, who's a senior partner and adjunct professor at Osgoode Professional Development, and Joan Haberman, a visual artist and retired master at the Ontario Superior Court from Canada. So we've got wonderful guests here from Canada this morning. Their credentials go on and on. They said I could just refer you back to their websites or to the willworkforfood.news website. And so I will do that. And then I would ask ladies, if you would please tell us about your food bank briefly, and then the floor is yours. So thank you so much.
Great. So you wanted us to tell you about our food bank here in Toronto?
Yes, Natalie will put the link in the chat for people who want to make donations. And so whatever is your preferred food bank, if you just even say that its name, or if you have some connection with it, very briefly, that's fine.
Yeah, just the Toronto Food Bank is a very vibrant organization here. And of course, now more than ever, there is a great need by people who at one point in time obviously did not have to avail themselves of the food bank, but we all know the great food crisis that's going on right now. And so please donate, and that would be much appreciated by us.
Thank you. That would indeed. And then if you would please let Natalie or Jeff or myself, if you would let one of us know the amount of your donation, we would be more than happy to add it to our running total. Thank you so much. All right, ladies, art and dispute resolution. Let's get to it.
Okay, I'm just, I have on my screen comes up people that are in the waiting room. So I'm hoping that's coming up on somebody else's screen as well, so that those people can be let in, because I'm going to share my screen, if I may, with a PowerPoint, and just to sort of guide us along the way. Okay. So a big thank you to Sare for inviting us to speak with you today. And of course, Jean, Natalie, and Jeff, to you for this wonderful work that you're doing with this organization. So we're going to talk about how using arts-based methods in conflict resolution teaching and training can encourage us indeed to see with new eyes and hear with new ears as we move forward building a new conflict culture and creating a new breed of conflict resolution professionals. So over the next 40 minutes approximately, we're going to talk about three things. So we're going to talk about what are arts-based methods, why are they important, and how can they help us develop the essential skills of creativity and collaboration. And we'll be sharing with you some of the work and teaching we've been doing in this area. So let's dive right in. So first, a little background on how this all came about. So I wear two hats, as a lawyer and as a classical pianist. And after years of growing frustration with not just litigation, but with the shortcomings of the alternative dispute resolution world and the inability to achieve optimal outcomes in process, despite our best efforts, I started to look at the problem with the eyes of a musician instead of the eyes of a lawyer. And I couldn't understand why musicians, often strangers from different countries and cultures without even a shared verbal language, how they could sort of get it together to work toward a resolution goal and lawyers could not. So I began to ask myself, were there skills and behaviors of collaborative music making that non-musicians might be able to learn that would assist them in designing more effective processes and in achieving more optimal outcomes? How and why are musicians able to transcend difference and work together to achieve their superordinate goal, which is that goal which no one person can achieve on his or her own? What did they know that conflict resolution practitioners didn't about effective communication, building an efficient and fully functioning negotiating community, and about communion or essential human connection? So I set out to determine, among other things, if the skills and behaviors practiced by ensemble musicians could be learned by non-musicians in non-musical settings through the use of arts-based learning models and methods. And the results of my PhD research, which was a comparative teaching study, produced a resounding yes. And students who engaged with the arts-based learning were able to shift their perspectives from traditional, contentious, competitive mindsets to more efficient, cooperative, and collaborative mindsets. And in simulated negotiations and mediations, the students who had the benefit of the arts-based methods outperformed their colleagues who had not. Joan?
Hi there. Little perspective from where I'm coming from as a former lawyer and jurist, and as a current painter with less and less to do with the legal world as time goes on. I met Linda over 30 years ago. I was chairing the articling committee for what was called the Crown Law Office Civil, part of the Ontario Ministry of the Attorney General. And in that context, I was interviewing a number of people. The resumes all looked fairly similar. Hers jumped out immediately because she'd been a concert pianist. My first thought was she was going to be very bright. She was going to be very efficient. She was going to be an incredibly hard worker, and she would bring creativity to everything she did and would be able to work under pressure. There's no way she would have made it in the music world without those assets. So she was a #1 pick for me automatically. I had an arts background. I'd been a serious painter as a girl, dissuaded from pursuing that as a career because I had to earn a living, and that is not possible in the arts, although apparently it is these days, but it wasn't back then. So I convinced my committee that she would be an astonishing, an amazing addition to our team, and we hired her. And over the years, I watched her career flourish. She started a firm as soon as she graduated with a colleague. She worked, she did her master's degree, she did her PhD, she had her PhD published as a book, It was all very interesting to watch. And the book she wrote overlaps a lot with the kind of work that we do, but it was from the musical perspective only. So when she approached me and asked me to do this course with her, I thought, great, we're going to work together again after such a long time, and we're going to be dealing with creativity. While I was watching her career flourish, mine was also flourishing. I spent 16 years as counsel. I moved to the bench, did that for 18 years. I raised 2 children, and they were finally out of the house. And I was finally free to say, I'm retiring early. I want to be a painter, and I am going to be a painter. And I am now 62, and if I don't start now, it's just never going to happen. So I did it. And it's wonderful to have had the opportunity to work with Linda to teach creativity and talk a little bit about the work I do. I am now a working artist. I have a studio out of my home. I just had a solo show at one gallery. I have another solo show coming up at Holy Blossom in Toronto. And that's what I do. And I'm back to Linda.
Okay, so a little bit about the what. So what is arts-based learning? Simply, it's the use of artistic skills, processes, and experiences as educational tools to foster learning in non-artistic disciplines and domains. It's essentially learning through the arts. The goal is not to train people to be artists per se, but to use art as a way to ignite artistic thinking vis-a-vis how we see problems and conflict situations and how to work together effectively with others. Over the last 30 years, arts-based methods have been used in a variety of settings with children and adults in schools, kindergarten to grade 12, in post-secondary and graduate programs, in corporate environments, and in continuing education. The use of arts-based methods has been fueled by global studies demonstrating the correlation between engagement in the arts and academic achievement, scientific accomplishment, and innovation. Music, as one such arts-based medium, has been found to open up pathways to creative thinking and sharpen qualities of collaboration, such as the ability to listen. And notable professionals with music backgrounds, such as former US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who's a concert pianist, they've stated that their music training provided them with a way to weave together disparate ideas and gave them the power to focus on the present and the future simultaneously. In the business world, arts-based learning has been found to enhance employee skills in areas of high-performance teamwork, change management, and intercultural communication. It's been used to develop creative capacities that encourage innovation in all aspects of corporate life, from leadership strategies to product design and employee performance. More than 400 of America's top Fortune 500 companies use artistic skills, practices, and experiences to foster creative thinking and strengthen innovative processes. Back in 2004, we had some stats on this that told us that 26 of 125 public and private medical schools in the US at that time reported the use of mandatory arts-based courses, with another 43 offering arts-based electives. And all of those were designed to improve things such as clinical skills development, communication, visual diagnostic skills, team building and collaboration by integrating traditional learning and arts-based learning. One such program at Yale was entitled Formal Art Observation Training, and that took medical students to the art gallery to study portraiture in order to improve their diagnostic skills. By studying painting from an artistic perspective, looking at color and texture, light and shade, at the demeanor of the subjects, the students in these programs were found to improve what was called their visual literacy, and they were better able to see their patients in more detail and in all their complexity. Studies such as the one that I conducted have found that using new metaphors and applying concepts from one domain to another is a way to shift thinking and gain new perspectives. The new metaphor that I've introduced is that of the musical ensemble, to literally consider negotiation and mediation, which are collaborative and creative endeavors, through the lens of ensemble music making, whether that ensemble is a choir, a jazz quintet, a drumming circle, a rock band, or a symphony orchestra. Joan, a little bit on the what?
The what? My perspective is not an academic one. I come to you from skills-based teaching only. When I taught extensively when I was on the bench, and I taught only skills courses, how to improve the way you do this or that, as opposed to anything substantive. So I'm coming to you that way today, and that's how I teach the course. From a painter's perspective, arts-based learning teaches you how to use your senses more deeply, so that when you engage with the world around you, you are taking in more. You see more deeply, you hear more, you are more aware of what is really going on behind what you see and hear. Sorry, double-sided pages. And I do this by being on high alert all the time. When my kids were little, sometimes one of them particularly lived in a cloud. And I used to tell her, if you got up in the morning and just turned your brain on and left it on all day, life would be so much easier. And that's what I do. I am always alert. I don't have to look out a window to know it's raining because I can hear the sound of it, and that's enough. I know in the back of my head it's raining. I watch Netflix shows and pick up accents from all over the world because I have an ear that's attuned to the sound of a language. I may not be able to speak any of it, but I know the music of it. And if I hear somebody speaking it on the bus, I can say that's Hungarian. I know the sound of that language. It's a wonderful thing to have because you're just more aware of everything that's going on. And to me, that's really the key to creativity. Being aware of what's happening so that you can engage with the world more and be creative in it. It allows you to notice things in a way that you can make distinctions between things. And that's where creativity comes in. You're looking at what's different about this, what makes this stand out. Why does this stand out in a way that matters? Why does that stand out in a way that I can disregard? It helps you pull things together and then eliminate the inessential. So the skill of paying attention allows me to go into my subject matter of a painting on a very deep level. I paint mostly landscape, exclusively landscape these days, botanicals and woods, essentially forests and gardens. I work from my own photographs. I play with my photographs. I can crop them so that I get the composition that I want. And it's set up in a way that'll make a good painting by cutting off here, cutting off there. Sometimes I enhance the color a little up a notch because I want it to be a little more stimulating, or I want it to be calmer. I'll tone down a blue sky. I want a softer mood. These are all things I look at and I think about, and I work in a very complex way. I have layer upon layer of paint, and I have tiny details. The current work I'm doing is 4 feet by 3 feet, which is quite a large canvas to be moving around. And I work sometimes with a size 1 brush, which is so thin, it's like a few hairs, because that's the small detail that's important to me. I want my viewers to feel that they want to see those small dots because they do make a difference, and it invites them in to engage with the work. So paying attention, sorry, I have the dregs of a sinus infection, started 2 months ago. Still trying to get rid of that. Paying attention was also probably the most important skill I brought to my work, both in my legal practice and on the bench. I watched faces. I watched to see who was fidgeting. I watched to see who was blinking too much or swallowing too much. I listened to the way people spoke, the language they choose to use when they speak, the pauses, who they looked at when they were speaking, or if they looked down. All of these things gave me cues to what was really going on in their heads. So it helped me when I was dealing with other lawyers. It helped me assess sincerity, honesty. It certainly helped me in court as a lawyer because I had a much better idea of what was going on in the judge's brain because I paid attention when they asked a particular question. I knew what was troubling them and I could deal with that. It was particularly helpful when I was on the bench in terms of what was being presented to me, because people can stand up with an incredibly sincere voice and face and tell you utter garbage. And unless you're really paying attention, you're busy taking a note. And, at some point you look up and say, what are you talking about? And my face would say that all the time. So I gave them visual cues back. I would listen with my whole body to the whole body that was coming at me and watch the whole body. And that's the kind of thing I try to teach, to make people alert to what's happening, because it will help them do the kind of work that they're doing. Back to you.
Okay, so that gives a little bit of idea there on the how the arts can help us, and what they do in terms of stimulating and enhancing our seeing and our hearing. So why arts-based methods? Why use them in teaching and learning about conflict resolution? It was Sir Ken Robinson who said, with respect to the way we've been or are still being taught, we are educating people out of their creative capacities. If we want people to be creative, we need to do creative things and use creative modalities in order to dig deep and access our natural resources of creativity and innovation. Management scholar Ted Buswick says that the arts can open up the mind in such a way that it can change behavior. By using or observing creative skills, we're taken out of a purely analytical framework, and that helps us view not only conflict-related issues, but the world at large from a different perspective. That changes the way we see things and ultimately the way we do things. Creativity, innovation, and the ability to work with others are three essential skills needed for success in the increasingly settlement-oriented conflict culture of the 21st century. And arts-based approaches to things like advocacy, negotiation, and problem solving can help us develop and enhance these skills. Arts-based learning can help expand our thinking and approaches to problem solving, conflict management, and dispute resolution beyond the limited, rational, logical considerations of traditional legal analysis. Engagements with the arts reconnects us to our creative potential and helps us see the efficacy of employing creative thinking in professional environments where analytical and critical thinking have generally been overemphasized. Experiences with new ways of seeing and hearing conflict have the potential to shift traditional norms and behaviors and bring about more desirable outcomes in practice. So, through the use of arts-based pedagogy, we encourage people to think of themselves as artists and to act from their artistic selves. Using arts-based methods is a way to help us get in touch with our creative selves. And it was the wonderful music educator, Elliot Eisner, who said this: "The aim of education ought to be conceived of as the preparation of artists. By the term artist, I do not mean necessarily painters and dancers, poets and playwrights, but individuals who have developed the ideas, the sensibilities, the skills, and the imagination to create work that is well proportioned, skillfully executed, and imaginative, regardless of the domain in which an individual works. The highest accolade we can confer upon someone is to say that he or she is an artist, whether as a carpenter or a surgeon, a cook or an engineer, a physicist or a teacher. The fine arts have no monopoly on the artistic." And what, in the end, is more important in our dispute resolution work than reaching agreements that are well proportioned, skillfully executed, and imaginative? Our work clearly requires us to be artists. So, Joan, a little bit more on the why.
Why? I just want to make sure you all understand that though some of us seem to have a more natural ability to be alert and pay attention, this is a skill that can be taught and can be developed. And I'm convinced of that by virtue of the fact that I'm still in touch with a lot of my students who've taken the course. And we first taught this, what, 3 years ago? Yeah, and they still thank me for it. So we obviously did something. We helped them shift perspectives. So I'm a great believer in teaching this way. For some time now, creativity, which was once very undervalued, as in when I was going to school and wanted to go to art school instead of university, and about 12 people almost died when I said that. Today, it's really taken center stage. Industry has finally understood that innovation means something new, making something new from the air, or combining different elements to come up with something new, something that's better, something that's more efficient, a more effective way of doing something, of building something. It's the key. So innovation requires a lot of hard work. If you want to get from concept to fruition, you have to start with the idea, you work to a model, it has to be tested, it has to be debugged, you have to determine if it's marketable. But the starting point is the idea, that just that nub of an idea. Why aren't we making that? Or if 6 other companies are making that, can we do it faster? Can we make it cheaper? Can we make it in a more climate-friendly way? How can we improve upon it? How can we make more money doing it? But it all starts with the idea. And ideas come from people who think creatively. And that's not something that just happens. We all are creative. I always start my class by saying that, because I have people that are going, no, not me, I'm not creative. And I look around the room and I always see somebody with a great pair of socks. And I go, you're creative. Look at the socks you chose to wear today. Everybody's going to look at you, or the glasses somebody's wearing. You think about the kitchen you came out of this morning, how you've organized it so you can grab a spoon and a bowl and they're right beside each other, and you can grab your cereal and get to work quickly. Or how you set up your office so you have your mug on the right side and your pen on the other side, and everything is where you need it. There is creativity in every choice you make, in terms of how you present yourself to the world and how you set your surroundings in the world around you, how you set them up. All of that is creative. You don't think about it, but it's there. And if you spend some time after we're done today thinking about it, you'll be surprised by yourselves. So the World Economic Forum, which measures the importance of various personal assets, ranks creativity right up there with both in terms of the economy and the environment. It is critical when we're dealing with both. In 2021, it was ranked as being of greater importance than IQ. And it was listed among the top 5 skills that they anticipated employers would be looking for when interviewing prospective candidates. I would hope so. Collaboration is another critical skill that's been highlighted, but it's always in the context of creativity as the threshold, because you need to be creative to come up with new ways to collaborate, to produce the kinds of developments we're going to need in a post-COVID, which should happen one day, world. So if we want a workforce that comes up with new and creative solutions in a never increasing complex world, we're going to have to look for new ways to do things. And that means arts-based ways. And that means we've got to educate people to figure out how to get in touch with their creativity. And that's what we're working towards. Ta-da.
Okay, and it was in fact Daniel Pink who said, the new MBA is an MFA. So recognition that we really needed to tap into our creative self and artistic ways of being. So we've covered the what and we've covered the why. So now we're going to delve into the how. So how can the arts help us? In its myriad forms, the arts are being used to assist in grasping concepts, engaging with ideas, developing emotional and social intelligence capacities, and an invigorating and innovating process. More and more, we're realizing the power of the arts to, as Edgar Schein says, inform, illuminate, and inspire us to hear more, see more, and feel more. Artists put us in touch with our creative selves. As Schein says again, they can stimulate us to broaden our skills, our behavioral repertoire, and our flexibility in response. Analysis of how the artist is trained and works can produce important insights into what is needed to perform and what it means to lead and manage. So let's just take a look now at some of the specific arts-based methods that Joan and I have developed and used in teaching conflict resolution. So I developed a set of music-based exercises that build from knowing to observing to doing. And I first introduced the new ensemble metaphor from a cognitive intellectual perspective. And we discuss how working from a we instead of a me, or an us versus them mentality, changes the essential frames that define who we are, what we do, and how we do it. So just to briefly explain on that, our dominant culture, Western metaphors for disputing are wars and games. And in that metaphor, who are we? Well, we're certainly not artists. We're warriors, we're hired guns, we're strategists and schemers. And then when we ask, what do we do and how do we do it? Well, if I'm a warrior or if I'm a strategist, I'm going to defeat at best, annihilate at worst, or we strive to outsmart or outmaneuver our opponents in a series of clever moves and counter moves. And the goal of that process, when we think through that frame, it's to win and to leave the table with the biggest piece of the proverbial pie. So in the new ensemble metaphor, we're not warriors and we're not strategists. The other party isn't our enemy or our opponent. In that metaphor, we're counterparts of one another. We're co-creators. When we ask, what do we do and how do we do it? Well, we stay open and fluid. We invite and welcome the participation and ideas of others. We may not like the other people in the ensemble, but we know that we can't achieve the superordinate goal of resolution on our own. We need everyone. We need every voice in order to achieve the goal. And to do so in a way that generates optimal results, we need to create a culture of cooperation. So the new metaphor is a way to shift our thinking, to start to unlearn brain patterns, associations, and behaviors. Another thing that I do is utilize a series of music-based interventions, including, for example, the creation of playlists. So how does that work? Well, students are asked to choose a group of songs or compositions to illustrate the progression of a conflict situation in which they found themselves. And students first take time to reflect on and examine how they feel about conflict. They then express these feelings to others using a musical lexicon that enables them to go where words often fail. And in this process, they reflect deeply on the impact of conflict on an emotional, psychological, and visceral level. They often discover that sometimes others choose the same music as them, but for entirely different reasons. And this in turn enables them to examine things like assumptions and culture and internal biases. We also engage in deep listening exercises. So we analyze a consonant piece of music that resembles ordinary everyday conversations, and then a dissonant piece of music that is more akin to the difficult conversations that we encounter in our conflict work. We listen to the music in this exercise for things like texture and tone and dynamics and phrasing, rhythm, tempo, things like pauses and rests and silence. What do they mean? We listen for nonverbal cues and clues. And then we apply those listening concepts back to our negotiation and mediation communication to encourage deeper and more mindful listening, such as considering, like, for example, when a jazz musician is doing a meandering solo, do the other musicians cut them off, or do they let them go on? Because in our communication, we know that if you cut someone off, we might miss the opportunity of potentially hearing some very important information. We need to think more about why things are being repeated in conversation. Is it just that the person is totally annoying, or are they not being fully heard somehow? What's the meaning of nonverbals? Are they completely benign, or are they signs of distress, or some kind of underlying aggression? Is something like volume, is that destructive to a positive communication, or might it just be an aspect of culture? So most people have never thought or analyzed their communications and conversations in this way. And as a result, they lose a lot of meaning and they lose a lot of important information. And we need to stay with dissonance. And these exercises help us to do that by providing us with analytical skills related to communication. A third thing that we do in terms of some music-based learning is we engage in exercises that enable us to see the metaphor in action. And that includes engaging in interactive workshops with string quartet or jazz ensembles to observe how they communicate, how they build community and build interpersonal connection. And then we map those concepts, what I call the 3 C's, back onto our non-musical negotiating, mediating processes and consider how we might more effectively navigate our own negotiation and mediation processes and work toward those outcome goals. In terms of the doing, engaging in the doing, this is the fun part. Sorry, I can tell you about this. We didn't make them sing per se in this last course that we did, although certainly that's one of the things that we sometimes do. We'll do team-dependent things that help us to experience rhythm and the importance of an underlying rhythm in conversation. What happens when things speed up or slow down? And so we've done things like beanbag toss to the chicken dance. We've worked on a scenario without words, where people have been given percussion instruments as their voice to try to express themselves in achieving a common goal or task together. And in these ways, we explore in a real hands-on fashion how to build effective teams in the face of changing circumstances and complexities. We also explore improvisation with percussion instruments and with call and response blues jamming with the jazz musicians. And there are just so many other possibilities, but those are just some of the broad brushstroke examples of the music-based exercises that I've developed and use. And Joan's now going to tell you about some of the art exercises that she also uses.
Whenever I start teaching the course, I always assume that for the most part, my students haven't touched a crayon since they were in kindergarten or the first grade. And in most cases, that's a fairly safe assumption. So it's critical for me to do 3 things with them. Teach them a little bit about how to make visual art, actually get them engaged in art exercises so they have the experience of making art, which is terrifying for some people, interestingly, and then talking about how what they did in making art can be applied to what they do in the context of negotiators and mediators, because that's the training that we were doing. I always draw together the theory and the practice of art with the practice of what they're doing. That's the most important part of the course for them. That's their takeaway. So this has all been very interesting and we've had a good time, but now what? Well, you've learned some skills and we have engaged in exercises in order to cement those skills. And then when you find yourself in a situation where you need those skills, you'll remember the exercises and they'll trigger the learning experience. So before we actually get into doing all those things, I like to talk to them at some length about what creativity is, what, you know, our some of our assumptions about it, that everybody who's creative must be an artist or a painter or a poet or an actor. And I have the same kind of conversation as I had at the beginning with you about how you're all creative in your own way. I also make sure they understand there are no shortcuts to this. There are no tricks. There are no formula. When I sit down to create a new painting, it's a new puzzle that I am solving from square one. I don't pick a subject unless I know it's going to challenge me, because otherwise it's going to be boring and I might as well do paint by numbers. So I want to find a piece that has given me a feeling. When I've come upon that scene in nature, it made me experience something. And my goal as a painter is to try and convey that visually to my viewers. I'm trying to get them to almost walk into the painting because of the detail that they have to see, and experience what I experienced when I saw this in nature. So that's an interesting skill to pass on to people. So when I say there aren't any shortcuts, there are certainly paths. And we start from some basic concepts. And the first thing I always talk to the students about is muscle memory. Most of us are seated today, so we are using muscle memory. Gravity is pulling us down, but the fact that our legs are tethered to the ground, our bodies still know how to sit upright, and we may pick up a pen or hit a keyboard and make some notes today without even looking at what we're doing, because that's muscle memory. Your hand knows exactly what its job is and it will do it, whether your brain is on or not. It just goes. But we talk about how muscle memory can be an impediment at times, a nuisance, and it can get in the way of creativity because we always do something this way. Are we going to take the time to think about perhaps there's a better way, an easier way, a faster way, a more efficient way of doing it? So we always do an exercise called writing with the non-dominant hand. And everybody has to write their name with their non-dominant hand and realize how incredibly awkward it is to do something that they do 100 times a week in most of our lives. But they have to actually think about every tiny aspect of it and create a mind-hand connection to guide their hand as it goes up and down and around. And oh my God, why did it just go down the page? So I find that a really valuable exercise to make people understand that it's important to break muscle memory sometimes because you're going to do something different. We also focus on one thing. So the students are instructed to write a poem, and they're supposed to write about anything, something they saw on TV last night, the woman who was sitting next to them on the subway, the man at the bus stop, a dream they had, one thing. And they're given a few moments to consider it, and then they're given some time to write it. And I have to say this year particularly, Saray, I was astonished at the poetry we got back. And when you are told you have to think about one thing and only just that thing for a period of time and then write about it, it's amazing what your brain does. You go in a much deeper way than you would when you're just thinking about the lady sitting next to me on the subway. What the heck was she doing? What was you doing there? Well, you think about it and you may come up with all kinds of possibilities. So that was sort of the first introduction to thinking more deeply about things. We also do what I call my yoga cleansing breaths. We do 3 deep breaths before we start to clear our mind, to still our hearts, and to create some space for creativity. And it's something that I teach people to do in their lives. If you're in any kind of a conflict situation and you just need a timeout, sit down, close your eyes for 2 minutes and do these breaths, and it just sort of, your blood pressure goes right down. So once we've done all of that, that's sort of the setup. We move on and I teach some basic art theory. And I teach it from the context of how I make a painting. I start by selecting my subject matter, which generally most of you in the working world don't have to do. Your subject matter appears in front of you or at your office door. But I choose the dimensions of the canvas and the shape of the canvas I'm going to work on because I want it to work well with my subject matter. I choose my palette. I will sit down with all my paints and decide what colors I want to use to make this say what I want it to say. And in doing whatever work any of you do, you always have decisions like that to make. And most of the time we don't think about it. We get up every morning. Today is Monday. I go to work and this is what I do. Today is Tuesday. I get up, I go to work and this is what I do. We rarely take the time to stop and think about, well, how do I do what I do? And why do I do it that way? Is there another way to do it? So we talk about all of that. And the decisions you made in the context of your work is probably on a more intellectual level. Mine is less tangible. But all of these kinds of decision-making processes that we sometimes ignore and just sort of slide over are critical to success at the outcome. So finally, I explore with my students the actual elements that I rely on. And I begin to go through certain art elements to get them to understand how a painting is put together. We look at slides of my work and I use them as examples of how this works or that works or doesn't work. And then we do the art exercises. The key is those art exercises. By doing something, you're creating the memory. By doing it, you're creating the trigger for the memory to come back when they're off in their own offices doing their own work. So for example, this year I worked with color theory with my students. We didn't do that when I did it, the course the first year. I was using different elements. But I decided I really like color theory. So we started with a color wheel. And in a color wheel, you can see the progression of colors, how if you put red and yellow beside each other and mush them, you're gonna get orange. If you put yellow beside blue, you're gonna get green. So you can see the progression. And color wheel goes around in a progression. And then I had them look at complementary colors. So those are colors opposite one another on the color wheel. So red and green, yellow and blue, purple and yellow. When you put complementary colors together, unlike colors on a color wheel, there's a vibration. It's very interesting visually, but you get a vibration just where they join. And each color looks more vibrant. So when you're painting, you're very aware of that, of your color placement, that it's looking a little dull here. There's a lot of purple in it, just throw a little yellow something in there and it'll brighten that whole corner up. And I use that to make them aware that how you place things in a negotiation or a mediation is important. You can have some very contentious issues, and if you just throw them on the table, it's like throwing a grenade into the room. But if you progress to it slowly, and eventually when you get there, you boil the frog in the water and he hasn't noticed because we just sort of turned the water up, the temperature up a little bit at a time. So I found that a very valuable exercise. We also talked about color in the context of how it sets the mood in a painting and also in a room. You can create a tone in a room. When you go in as a mediator, if you know you have a particularly difficult lawyer you're working with, you're going to want to be a very strong person going into that room because you want them to know that you're not going to take any guff. But if you're dealing with a difficult family situation and everybody is ripped apart, you're going to come in and be grandma. We all have different personalities. We bring to different aspects of our lives, and sometimes we can bring them to our work too, and it improves what we're doing. So we talk about mood. We talk about focal point. When you're doing a painting, you're trying to engage your viewers in keeping their eye going around the whole painting, taking it all in, because you're painting it for a reason. There's either a message or an emotion you're trying to convey. And if they leave the painting before they got it, you haven't done your work. So you use focal point and you create focal point using color, using line, using other elements. So we talked about that somewhat and how important it is. And it's important in the work they're doing also. What's the focal point? What is the resolution you're hoping to arrive at here if you're doing a mediation? If you're a negotiator, what is the resolution you're hoping for your client? How do I get there? That's my focal point. When we talked about line, we talked about natural line. When you're painting gardens and forests, as I do, I have lots of natural lines. I have tree limbs, I have trunks, I have twigs, and I have stalks, and those are all natural lines. If I were doing more structural work, there'd be building walls, and there'd be windows and roof lines, and there's always shadows. I love shadows. They make the painting for me. So those are all natural line, and your eye will follow the natural line in a painting. But we also have contrived lines in painting. Where you need a line and there isn't one there naturally, you can build one with little flecks of color. Your eye is such a strange object. Your eye and your brain want to connect things. So if I put a path of red, I put a little fleck of red in a flower and a little bit of red in that brick on the side of the building, and then a little bit of brick in the chimney, your eye is going to make a line. It's going to connect them all up. And that will keep you in that part of the painting. It'll get you up there so you can then get down and go around again. Let's see, where am I? The first time I taught the course, we did the drawing. We did a whole exercise about contour line and the elephant in the room. The contour line is the line you don't see. There's no real line, but somewhere between the space in the world and my hand, there's a perceived line. If I were to draw it, I would normally draw a contour line, the outside line that defines it. Well, we had to draw this hand without any contour line. Instead, we drew it from the outside in. So we had to fill in all the spaces so that you're left with the hand. And then we drew it from the inside out. So we drew all the lines and the wrinkles and the folds and the knuckles, and again, without an outside line. Why do we do that exercise? Because sometimes there is an elephant in the room and you don't want to talk about it. It's like throwing a grenade on the table. How do we come at the issue from a different way? From the outside, from the inside, without actually discussing what it is nobody really wants to talk about. So that's why we did that. We talked about perspective. As an artist, you have to always keep your perspective, a certain level of distance from your work. Because if you fall in love with it too quickly, you don't take risks. Oh, this is working so well over here. It doesn't work that well for that, but I love it. How can I take it out? But you have to sometimes. Sometimes you have to just take a bunch of white paint on a big brush and go and wait for it to dry and start again, because you can fix it. And if you love it too much, you're not going to do that. So you also need to be able to walk away from your work, because most of us want to sell it at some point. That's what we do it for. My house is overflowing with work. I have to sell some stuff at my next show. So we keep a distance. So the exercise, each table had, everybody started with a piece of paper and they drew for 10 minutes and they fell in love with their drawing. And then I said, okay, pass the person to the left. And then they did that again and again. And at the end of the exercise, every table had a full drawing completed by everyone at their table. And for me, this was an exercise in perspective and distancing. And they were all thrilled because they saw it as a wonderful collaboration. They loved the collaborations that they made. So I was delighted. It was a twofold win-win for me. We copied I took photos from magazines and asked them to try and copy them. Now, these are people, for the most part, who hadn't had a lot of drawing experience. But because of everything we had done leading up to it, they knew how to pay attention. They knew what mattered. So they had to consider relative scale, proportion, relative placement of objects, how to use color, how to use line. And it was shocking what people did. I was really moved by the work people did. The incredible effort that was put in a short time to create terrific stuff. I hope you're still drawing. Sorry, are you drawing? No.
But I think about drawing, so.
Okay, well, thinking is a start. We move on to doing. So these are all concepts that are fun during the week, but they're all concepts that I hope you're all taking, my students are all taking with them when they leave. I know a lot of them do. They talked to me about it. Soraya is thinking about it. She may do it at any moment now. So this was a very compressed explanation of what we do and how we do it, why we think it works. I hope it gives you a good introduction to what arts-based learning involves and what can be accomplished by it. And I think Linda wants to sign off with you too.
Thanks for that, Joan. That gives a great idea. And the one other thing that we did in sort of pulling it all together was we worked with a single multi-party negotiation throughout the entire week. And as a way to sort of vision, what is my client or my party, what do I want? What's important to me? Now, what do I think is important to the other people? What do I think are possibilities for resolution? And we created collages that sort of were a manifestation of that visioning. So there was a lot of opportunity to use the art as a way to put our thoughts on paper in that creative visual way. So just in summary, you know, the purpose of the arts-based learning exercises, whether it's the music or the art or anything else, is to be able to develop our ability to think more creatively, to work together more effectively, to develop our emotional and social intelligence capacities through working together in true collaboration, and to develop our listening skills, our visual acuity in analyzing conflict situations and engaging with others, knowing that the essence of negotiation and mediation is that sense of we-ness, not me-ness, and we can't solve problems and resolve conflict alone. When some people hear about arts-based methods, about creativity and collaboration, ensemble models, art making, they think it's all fluff and kumbaya. So none of our work is kumbaya. Conflict management, conflict resolution is hard work, and the music of conflict is more dissonant than it is consonant, and the art of conflict is more abstract than real. When we step outside our traditional frame and we look at our work through a different lens, this often brings new perspectives and enables us to see ourselves, what we do, and what we need to do in a different light. And that's what arts-based methods have to offer. I just want us to end with one of my favorite quotes. So as Marcel Proust said, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So Joan and I want to encourage each of you to expand your creative capacities, to explore arts-based methods in your work and in your training. And we encourage each of you to regard yourself as an artist, to see with new eyes and listen with new ears as we all work together to masterfully and artfully achieve those superordinate goals that no one of us can achieve without the others. So we thank you for your attention, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so very much. And thank you, Sari, for introducing us to Dr. Ippolito and Ms. Haberman. Fantastic. And the comments in the chat, I would urge everyone to look at. Isn't it interesting how many politicians turn to art and painting at some point? And I just pulled out, listening to you, this little book I have, Painting as a Pastime, Winston Churchill, as he turned to painting, and it's a fantastic little book. So that said, we do have a few questions in the chat, but we have only 2 minutes. So let me ask a short question, okay, and for a short answer, because we do stop at the top of the hour. Do you recommend having some type of music playing in the background while we do our mediations and arbitrations? And if yes, what type is best?
I've never considered that. As a mediator, I think I might find it distracting.
Yeah, I would say that sometimes that could be a little subversive because, you know, sort of from a culturally sensitive point of view, what kind of music would you choose, right? Sometimes you could ask people on your intake form, would people find that inviting? Would they find that somehow helpful? And then, you know, that might be a way to use it.
But culturally, again, you're coming into situations where I know I would prefer, in the studio, sometimes I'm listening to Neil Young all day or Joni Mitchell, but some days I'm listening to Max Richter because I want classical, contemporary, no lyric.
Yeah.
I just want to be in a loop of,
yeah.
And I don't know that everybody's going to be comfortable with the same music.
Right, right.
So I don't know. I don't offhand know. And I work with music all the time, but not when there's words going on in a room.
And Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, fine Canadian singers, right?
Always. And a little Leonard Cohen.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Thank you so much, Dr. Ippolito and Ms. Haberman. And if a judge can go to being an artist, a painter, certainly we can find the artiste in all of ourselves and in our practices. So thank you all so much. We'll see you next week. Unless, Jeff, did you have a comment? No. Okay.
Could I just say that anybody who has a question, that they can absolutely email us with those questions, and we're happy to provide that information if you don't already have it.
Yeah, I'll put the emails in the chat.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good day, a good week, and we'll see you next time, next week, same time, same place. Well,
Thank you so much.
Different Zoom link. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Saray.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining.